Your body has been quietly doing something remarkable, and no one has told you. Not your doctor, not your last blood panel, not the number on your scale. But if you're over 70 and you have even 3 of the signs I'm about to describe, your body is outperforming the majority of people your age in ways that science can now measure, and that most physicians never take the time to explain. This isn't reassurance. This is biology, and it changes what you should be doing starting today. I'm Dr. Elena Marsh. I've spent more than 20 years in clinical practice, and in that time, I've watched a predictable pattern repeat itself. Patients come in convinced something is wrong. They've compared themselves to someone else, to a number they read online, to what they look like at 50. And what I have to tell them, what the research increasingly confirms, is that aging well isn't about looking younger. It's about specific, measurable markers that most people don't know to look for. A landmark study published in the Journals of Gerontology tracked adults over 70 for more than a decade and found that the conventional markers we use to assess aging, weight, resting heart rate, grip strength, sleep quality, cognitive processing speed, don't decline at the same rate in everyone. In fact, a significant subset of adults over 70 show what researchers now call compressed morbidity, a pattern where serious decline is delayed dramatically, and health is maintained at a level that defies chronological age. These are people whose bodies are aging more slowly than their birth years suggest, and they share a set of recognizable signs. You may be one of them. You probably don't know it yet. Quick question before we go further. When you wake up in the morning, do you get out of bed feeling like you slept or feeling like you need to recover from sleeping? Type rested or tired in the comments right now. I read every single one, and what you write there will matter before this video is over. Now, the 7 signs. I want to be precise about what I mean before we go through each one. These are not compliments. They are not things people say to make you feel good about your age. They are physiological signals, some obvious, some that you've almost certainly dismissed as unimportant, that indicate your body is maintaining function in ways the research now links directly to longevity, cognitive preservation, and dramatically reduced risk of the events that derail most people in their 70s and 80s. A 2022 study published in Nature Aging identified what researchers called a biological age gap, a measurable divergence between a person's chronological age and the actual cellular age of their tissues. The gap isn't random. It correlates with behaviors, sleep patterns, inflammatory markers, and a set of functional signs that are visible without a single blood test. Those signs are what we're covering today. And here is what matters most before we begin. If you have these signs and you haven't been acting on them, you've been leaving protection on the table without knowing it. If you don't have all of them yet, what I'm giving you in the second half of this video will tell you exactly how to move in the right direction. Today, without spending anything, stay with me. Because sign number 1 is something almost everyone over 70 experiences, but almost no one interprets correctly. Sign number 1, you wake up without an alarm, and you feel ready. Not groggy, not medicated into stillness. Ready. Most people assume that waking early in your 70s is just what aging does to you. An inconvenience. Something your body imposes on you without your consent. But that framing is backwards. What researchers at the University of California, Berkeley's Sleep and Neuroimaging Lab found is that adults who maintain what they call sleep architecture integrity, meaning their sleep cycles remain intact, with adequate deep sleep and REM sleep, show measurably lower levels of amyloid plaques, the proteins most strongly associated with Alzheimer's disease progression. In other words, the quality of your sleep is not just about how rested you feel. It is one of the most powerful protective mechanisms your brain has against the kind of cognitive decline that ends independence. When you wake up without an alarm and feel ready, not exhausted, not reaching for something to get you going, your brain's glymphatic system has likely completed its nightly clearing cycle. This system, discovered relatively recently, functions like a pressure wash for your neural tissue. It activates almost exclusively during deep sleep. It flushes waste products, including those amyloid proteins, out of your brain and into your cerebrospinal fluid for elimination. If your body wakes itself up after completing that cycle rather than being yanked out of deep sleep by an alarm, that is not a minor convenience. That is your brain telling you it finished the job. Most people over 70 don't have that. Sleep fragmentation, light sleep, or chemically altered sleep all disrupt the glymphatic cycle before it completes. If yours is completing, you're ahead of where most people are, and you may not have realized it until right now. Sign number 2, your balance hasn't disappeared, and you don't think about it. Here's a test I want you to do right now, or the next time you're standing near something stable you can reach for if you need it. Stand on one leg. Don't hold anything. Count the seconds. If you can hold that position for 10 seconds or more, you are in a category that a 2022 study published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine found correlates directly with a 17% lower risk of all-cause mortality in adults over 55. Not a small margin, not a statistical footnote, 17% for standing on one leg. What that test actually measures isn't leg strength. It measures the integrity of your proprioceptive system, the network of receptors in your muscles, joints, and inner ear that constantly tells your brain where your body is in space. This system degrades silently in most people across their 60s and 70s. When it degrades, falls happen. And falls, for adults over 70, are one of the leading causes of catastrophic health decline. Not just broken bones, but the cascade that follows. Immobility, muscle loss, clotting risk, pneumonia. The proprioceptive system doesn't announce its deterioration with pain or obvious symptoms. It just quietly stops working as well. Until the morning the floor comes up faster than your brain can respond. If you stood on one leg just now and you didn't fall, your system is still talking to your brain clearly. That is not a small thing. That is the difference between independence and what comes after. Sign number 3, your grip is still strong. I don't mean you can open jars without asking for help, though that matters too. I mean that when you shake someone's hand, there is still force behind it. When you carry groceries, you don't think about your hands. Grip strength is one of the most studied longevity biomarkers in gerontology, and one of the most underestimated. A comprehensive meta-analysis published in the British Medical Journal reviewing data from over 2 million adults across multiple countries found that declining grip strength was a stronger predictor of cardiovascular mortality than systolic blood pressure. Read that again. Stronger than blood pressure. What grip strength measures at a systemic level is the overall integrity of your musculoskeletal and cardiovascular health. It is a proxy signal, meaning it doesn't cause longevity, but it reflects the biological conditions that produce it. Lean muscle mass, mitochondrial density, anabolic hormone function, neural efficiency. When grip strength declines in adults over 60, it rarely declines alone. It declines alongside muscle mass, alongside bone density, alongside the metabolic machinery that keeps your heart muscle functioning efficiently. If yours hasn't declined, if your hands are still doing what you ask them to do without thought, your body is maintaining a biological infrastructure that most people your age have already begun to lose. Sign number 4, your mind moves between subjects without getting stuck. I'm not talking about remembering names perfectly, because almost no one does. And that particular form of recall is not the most meaningful measure of cognitive aging. What matters more, and what the research consistently shows, is cognitive flexibility. The ability to shift attention, hold two ideas at the same time, adapt when a plan changes, Follow a conversation that moves quickly. This is a function of the prefrontal cortex and its connections to the hippocampus. And it is one of the first systems to show stress when neuroinflammation rises, when blood sugar is chronically elevated, when sleep is fragmented, when the brain's clearing system is being overwhelmed. If you can follow this video, if you can track the argument, remember what I said about sign number 1 while I'm talking about sign number 4. Notice that I'm building towards something. Your prefrontal networks are intact in ways that are not universal among people your age. Not assumed, not guaranteed, present. That matters. And it's worth recognizing as the physiological signal it is, not dismissing as, I'm just sharp. Sign number 5, you recover, not quickly necessarily, but you recover. You have a hard day, physically, emotionally, logistically, and within 24 to 48 hours, your body resets. Your sleep returns. Your energy returns. You're not still carrying the weight of Tuesday on Friday. This is a measure of what researchers call allostatic resilience, your body's ability to return to baseline after a stress response. As people age, the allostatic system, governed primarily by cortisol, the adrenal glands, and the autonomic nervous system, becomes less elastic. Stress responses that should be temporary become prolonged. Cortisol levels that should spike and fall stay elevated. And when cortisol stays elevated chronically, it accelerates visceral fat accumulation, suppresses immune function, elevates blood pressure, and disrupts the very sleep architecture we talked about in sign number 1. The people whose allostatic system remains elastic, who bounce back, are the people whose inflammatory burden stays low across decades. They are, in biological terms, aging slower. If you recognize yourself in that description, if you bend but return, that is not a personality trait. That is a measurable physiological advantage. Sign number 6, your appetite tells you something true. You get hungry. You eat. You stop when you're full. The signal arrives. You respond. It ends. This sounds like a low bar. It is not. Appetite dysregulation, driven by changes in leptin sensitivity, ghrelin signaling, and insulin response, is one of the most common and least discussed features of accelerated aging. When these hormonal signals degrade, hunger becomes disconnected from actual caloric need. People eat past fullness without recognizing it, or they lose appetite entirely, a pattern associated with muscle wasting and a clinical condition called anorexia of aging, which is far more common and far more dangerous than most people realize. If your appetite still functions as a reliable signal, if your body asks for food when it needs fuel and quiets when it has enough, your metabolic and hormonal infrastructure is doing something a large percentage of adults over 70 can no longer rely on. You've been living in this body for over 70 years. You adapted to it. You worked around it. You probably stopped noticing most of what it does right, because no one ever sat down and told you what right looks like. No one told you. Until now. Has your doctor ever explained any of these connections to you? The grip strength, the balance, the recovery, as signs of how well you're aging? Write never or yes in the comments right now. Your answer matters more than you think. Now here's what connects all 6 of these signs at the biological level, and why sign number 7 is the one that will surprise you most. Every single one of these signs reflects low systemic inflammation, not the inflammation you feel, not swelling, not a sore joint, chronic low-grade inflammation at the cellular level, what researchers now call inflammaging, a term coined to describe the slow, silent inflammatory state that drives most of the major diseases of aging: cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, neurodegenerative decline, and certain cancers. The people who age well aren't just lucky. Their inflammatory burden is lower, and it's lower because of specific measurable behaviors and biological patterns that either protect against inflammaging or accelerate it. The 7 signs I'm describing today are not random. They are the visible surface of a deeper biological reality that the research now allows us to measure, understand, and act on. Stay with me, because sign number 7 brings this entire framework together. And what comes after it is the protocol, a specific, free, immediately applicable sequence you can start today, designed precisely for the biology we've been talking about. Don't leave before you have it. Sign number 7, you still want things, not objects, not possessions, things. You want to know how something turns out. You want to see someone again. You want to finish a book, take a trip, learn something you never got around to learning. You wake up and there is something on the other side of the morning worth moving toward. I'm not describing optimism as a personality trait. I'm describing what neuroscientists call dopaminergic drive, the activity of your brain's reward anticipation system centered in the nucleus accumbens and mediated by dopamine pathways that connect to your prefrontal cortex, your motor system, and your memory networks. This system does not just make life feel meaningful. It keeps you moving, literally. A longitudinal study published in JAMA Psychiatry followed adults over 65 for more than 8 years and found that those who scored higher on measures of purposeful engagement, wanting things, anticipating things, orienting toward future events, had significantly lower rates of Alzheimer's disease progression, lower rates of cardiovascular events, and lower all-cause mortality than those who had lost that forward orientation. The mechanism is not mysterious once you understand it. Dopaminergic drive keeps the prefrontal cortex active. An active prefrontal cortex regulates the stress response, modulates inflammatory signaling, and maintains the motivational architecture that keeps people physically active, socially connected, and neurologically engaged, all of which are independent protective factors against every major disease of aging. When people lose the wanting, when mornings feel like obligations rather than openings, that is not just depression. That is a measurable shift in the neurochemical environment that accelerates biological aging at the cellular level. If you still want things, if there is something on the other side of this week that you are moving toward, your brain is maintaining a protective drive that a significant portion of adults over 70 have quietly lost without anyone naming it as the loss it is. That is sign number 7. And it is, in my clinical experience, the most important one. Now, I want to give you something you can do with all of this, because knowing that your body is aging well is valuable. But knowing how to protect and extend that advantage, how to keep these 7 signs intact for as long as possible, is what actually changes your trajectory. Here is exactly what I want you to do, starting today. The Longevity Signal Protocol, a 4-step daily practice for adults over 70 who want to stay ahead. This protocol is not a wellness routine. It is not motivational advice. It is a biologically targeted sequence designed specifically to protect the 7 systems we've been talking about: your sleep architecture, your proprioception, your grip and musculoskeletal integrity, your cognitive flexibility, your allostatic resilience, your metabolic signaling, and your dopaminergic drive. 4 steps, no equipment, no cost, starting today. Step 1. The 10-minute morning hydration and movement window targets: allostatic resilience, metabolic signaling, proprioception. Within 10 minutes of waking, before coffee, before your phone, before anything, drink 12 ounces of water at room temperature. Not cold, room temperature. Here is why this specific detail matters. During sleep, your body loses fluid through respiration and temperature regulation. When you wake up mildly dehydrated, which most adults over 70 do, your blood viscosity is slightly elevated. Your cortisol is naturally at its daily peak, part of the normal circadian cycle called the cortisol awakening response. If you add caffeine to that cortisol spike before hydrating, you amplify the vasoconstrictive effect at the exact moment your cardiovascular system is already under its highest daily demand. Room temperature water, not cold, allows for faster gastric absorption without triggering the mild vagal response that cold water can cause in adults with any degree of cardiovascular sensitivity. Immediately after drinking, spend 3 minutes doing slow, deliberate standing balance work, one leg at a time. Eyes open first, then eyes closed if you're stable and near support. 30 seconds each side, 2 rounds. This is not exercise in the conventional sense. This is a daily calibration of your proprioceptive system, the exact system that sign number 2 measured. Research from the Journal of Aging and Physical Activity shows that daily proprioceptive training in adults over 65 reduces fall risk by up to 37% over 12 weeks, more than any single pharmaceutical intervention currently approved for fall prevention. Total time, 10 minutes, every morning. That is the first step. Step 2, the purposeful engagement anchor. Targets, dopaminergic drive, prefrontal cortex activation, cognitive flexibility. Each morning, after the hydration and balance window, identify one specific thing you are genuinely looking forward to today. Not a task, not an obligation, something you actually want. Write it down, one sentence. On paper, not a screen. Here is the mechanism. The act of articulating anticipation, putting language to a desired future state, activates the prefrontal cortex and the dopaminergic reward pathway simultaneously. It is, in neurological terms, a targeted activation of the exact system that sign number 7 measures. Research from psychological science found that adults who engaged in daily written anticipatory reflection showed measurably higher dopamine receptor sensitivity over time, meaning the system didn't just activate in the moment. It became more responsive, more efficient, more protective. You are not journaling. You are not doing affirmations. You are giving your brain's reward system a daily signal that the future is worth orienting toward. One sentence, on paper, every morning. That is the second step. Step 3, the post-meal walk. Targets, metabolic signaling, inflammaging, cardiovascular function. Within 30 minutes of your largest meal of the day, walk for 10 to 15 minutes at a comfortable pace. Not a workout, a walk. Here is exactly what happens in your body during that window. After eating, blood glucose rises as your digestive system processes carbohydrates. In adults over 60, insulin sensitivity is frequently reduced, meaning the signal that tells your cells to absorb that glucose takes longer to arrive and works less efficiently. Walking within 30 minutes of a meal activates your skeletal muscles independently of insulin through a glucose transport mechanism called GLUT4 translocation that does not require the insulin signal at all. Your muscles absorb glucose directly, blunting the post-meal spike and reducing the chronic low-grade inflammation that elevated blood glucose produces at the vascular level over time. A 2022 meta-analysis published in Sports Medicine found that a 10-minute walk after meals reduced post-meal blood glucose levels by up to 30% compared to sitting, more effectively than a longer walk taken at a different time of day. The timing is the mechanism. 30 minutes after your largest meal, 10 to 15 minutes of walking. That is the third step. Step 4. The pre-sleep tension release. Targets, sleep architecture integrity, allostatic resilience, cortisol regulation. 60 minutes before you intend to sleep, dim the lights in whatever room you're in and spend 5 minutes doing progressive muscle release. Not stretching, not yoga, not anything that requires instruction or equipment. Starting at your feet, tighten every muscle you can in your feet and calves for 5 seconds, then release completely. Move to your thighs, then your abdomen, then your hands, arms, and shoulders, then your jaw and face. Total time, 5 minutes. Here is the biology. Your cortisol awakening response peaks in the morning and should decline steadily through the day, reaching its lowest point in the hours before sleep. In adults whose allostatic system is under chronic stress, or simply in adults whose nervous system has been overstimulated by screens, news, or unresolved cognitive load in the evening, cortisol does not fall as it should. Elevated evening cortisol delays the onset of deep sleep, shortens the duration of slow-wave sleep, and directly disrupts the glymphatic clearing cycle we discussed in sign number 1. Progressive muscle release activates the parasympathetic nervous system, your body's rest and recovery mode, by triggering the relaxation response through the contrast between muscular tension and release. It signals the adrenal axis that the day is over. It is one of the most reliably studied non-pharmacological interventions for improving sleep architecture in older adults, with research published in Sleep Medicine Reviews showing measurable improvements in slow-wave sleep duration within 2 weeks of nightly practice. 5 minutes every night, 60 minutes before sleep. That is the 4th step. 4 steps, 10 minutes in the morning, 1 sentence written down. A 10-minute walk after your largest meal, 5 minutes before sleep. That is the longevity signal protocol. Say that name to someone tonight, because what it protects, those 7 signs, that biological advantage you've built over 7 decades, is worth protecting deliberately. You came into this video not knowing what your body has been quietly doing right. You're leaving with 7 specific signs that science now links directly to longevity, cognitive preservation, and dramatically reduced risk of the events that derail most people in their 70s and 80s. And you're leaving with a protocol. 4 steps, no cost, starting today, designed to protect every one of those systems for as long as possible. That took 20 minutes. Your body has been working for over 7 decades. The least you can do is spend 20 minutes understanding what it's been trying to tell you and act on it. The longevity signal protocol starts tonight. The pre-sleep tension release is 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes. There is someone in your life, a spouse, a sibling, a friend, who has all 7 of these signs and has spent years dismissing them as just getting older. They don't know what those signs actually mean. This video can reach them before that information disappears into another appointment that ran out of time. Share this with someone you love who is over 65. Not for this channel, because what their doctor never had time to explain is right here. And they deserve to know it. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that now. Every week I bring honest, research-based information about what your body needs after 60. The information I spent 20 years wishing every patient had walked in already knowing. Subscribe and come back next week. Because what I'm covering then connects directly to everything we talked about today. And you'll want to have seen this first. Before you go, a word I take seriously. Everything I've shared today is based on published research and more than 2 decades of clinical experience. It is not a substitute for your personal medical care. Before making any changes to your medications, your diet, or your daily routine, please speak with your own doctor first. They know your history. They know your chart. Bring this information into that conversation. Write down the protocol name, the signs, the studies. That is exactly where good medicine begins. Not in a waiting room with 7 minutes on the clock, but in a real conversation between you and someone who has all the time your health deserves. Take care of yourself. I'll see you next week.